So I got up and got a drink since the last video, and it hit me, and I got a hunch, and I am pretty sure I know what's going on here. Why are we getting those issues with all the debug windows? If you notice, we really rely on new frame. Okay, we say new frame. Let me get my drawing tool. Okay, if you remember with the profiler, we come in. Where are we doing some profiling? So we come in, we say matrix multiplication, all right, and then we're supposed to add a value. So let's say here's our profile for matrix multiplication, and then we come in and say, okay, vector transformation. Here's a entry for vector transformation, and then you know what we do? We actually since the repaint is being called much more than the update, then we turn around and say, hey, matrix multiplication, here's another entry, and vector transform, here's another entry. That one took a long time. That's a 99. Anyway, and so depending on the luck of the draw for that run, let me grab this. Depending on the luck of the draw for that run, we could get several of these duplicate categories put out. Right, which means we are not calling the profiler consistently, right? And then eventually update gets in here. The timer eventually pops, and here comes the update, and we say new frame. All right, and then maybe in that next frame we may or may not end up having as many paints, or maybe we have more paints, or paint. But eventually, we probably go out of bounds, off bounds here, or we're adding categories in the wrong order. Who knows? Okay, but what we're adding each frame is not consistent with what we added the previous frame, which is something we tested for. Now, aren't we glad that we wrote the test and thought ahead? But something we did not think ahead of, something we did not consider or think ahead of, something I forgot to do, was to check for duplicate category entries. I don't think we wrote any code for that. Now, does it matter if we get duplicate categories? I think so. Because it's really a sign that we did something wrong. All right, we obviously did something wrong. So it's going to take some runtime overhead, but we need to check for duplicate categories. I want to verify that my hunch is correct. Guess how I'm going to do that? I'm going to do that with unit tests. We're going to do test-driven development by, hey, Jamie's got a hunch. Let's write a test for duplicate categories. Let's solve the duplicate category problem by flagging an error, at least with an assert. And then we will go through and come back to this problem where update is only being called a few times because paint's being called over and over and over again. Because of the way windowing systems work with their paint. Okay, hopefully that made sense. So first things first, let's write a test to prove that my hunch is correct. Let's go to Engine Tester, right click, set as startup project. Where is it? Right here. And profile tests. Let's go out here. And this is also something to learn from, is I tried to come up with all the possible scenarios for our profiler, and I tried to write tests for that. But we'll come across scenarios we didn't expect, and as you do, well, just turn on your test-driven development hat and test for those situations. Okay, so let's do this. Test profiler. Adding duplicate frames or categories in one frame. A little verbose, but I'd rather be more too verbose than less verbose. Less verbose is just painful for me and the programmer that is coming after me, which might be myself in about a month. So I'm just going to glance at these other tests, just kind of get an idea. It's been a few days since I've worked with this project. It's probably not a few days for you, but it's actually been about a couple weeks since I've been able to work on this. So need to initialize, right frame shutdown. Yeah, I'm just going to grab this, Control C, paste it down here for my reference. I don't want to write frames because I know write frames will write the right frames consistently, and I don't want to check frames either. So I guess all I'm doing is saying initialize and shut down. Let's say profiler.add entry, my first category, and the float time will be, I don't know, let's just do 1. And let's do my second category here. The second category, it should be 2. And profiler dot, well, control L, control VV. And then we won't call new frame. Well, we will here, profiler dot new frame. We learned the hard way we need to do that. So we say new frame, but I got my first category, my second category, and then let's write my first category again. All right, this should cause a problem. All right. Now, how do we detect that problem in a unit test? All right, we're not going to use exceptions at all. Unit testing exceptions is so simple. It would simplify this so much. But we don't use exceptions in games because they have a lot of runtime overhead, which they do. So we're not going to use exceptions. We could return a Boolean from add entry saying whether we could add the entry or not. But then if we got this requirement that we have to return void. Remember, we're compiling out the profiler, and so we have to return void, or else the compiler can't compile it out. Oh, so that's not gonna work. So what are we gonna do? I don't know if this is the best solution. It is a solution. It will work. It is simple. I'm just going to make a function that takes a pointer to a Boolean that we can say, hey, is the status currently good? All right, now, why do I want to do that when chances are I'll never ever call this function except in this unit test? Well, one, I want to prove that the unit tests are failing. I want to make them fix, and that's fine. But then two, inside the profiler, we're going to drop an assert. Right? And we've seen the assertions crash our program. And the assert will say, hey, if you give me a duplicate category, then I'm just going to blow up. All right. So we know the assert will blow up in our face when we're actually in the game trying to make the game work. And if we try to add duplicate categories like we're doing right now, the assert will get in our face. But for testing purposes, I'm just going to do a simple Boolean. I can take a pointer to a Boolean. That's kind of sounds weird, doesn't it? I'm taking a pointer to an 8-bit value. But the reason why I want to take a pointer is the compiler can still compile that out. As far as the compiler is concerned, the pointer to something is just as good as nothing. So what I'm saying is the compiler doesn't expect us to modify something that we get via pointer. So if we modify it, great. If we don't modify it, fine. The compiler can still compile that out. I think that'll become more apparent here as we go forward. Let me just show you. Let's go here to profiler.cpp, actually profiler.h, and in the private section, I think we'll do it right here. No, we were doing this. Remember the singleton? We were doing all this. So I think I'll just put it up here. It's a data member. And this is the default private area. So bool good. Alright, and then in the constructor, I'm going to assume good is... Actually, no, we got that initialized, don't we? We have initialized. So profiler.initialize, I'm going to say good. We'll assume all is well. Okay, good gets true. Where did we stick file name? I see we have another data member, file name. Where did we put that? In here. It's right there. So, but we conditionally compile it out, which we can do with this as well. Control X, Control Shift L, Control Enter, Control V, bool good. So when you initialize, we'll assume all is good, and we need a function to check that. So void again, because we want to compile it out. check is good. Bool star status const, and we'll define that in the compilation unit. Control L, Control V, Control V. See, notice here I can just say, well, curly curly. So this function returns void. Yeah, it takes a pointer. Who cares? Whatever. Const does nothing. The compiler can still compile this out. But then in this version, we're actually going to write to that memory location. So let's go to profiler. Actually, I'll grab this first. Control C, profiler.cpp. Go down to the bottom. Check is good. Very good. Let's grab this. Put this here. And backspace, enter, enter. And right here, I'm not going to do anything quite yet. Remember, we're doing the test-driven development forward testing. So let's make sure the tests fail before we make them pass. I'm getting rid of squigglies. That might be just IntelliSense having issues. I'm going to Control-Shift-S, save all the files. Let's go back to profile tests. And right here, bool status, I want to say profiler.check status. Check is good. You know what? Let's, I think I naturally just said check. Did you notice how I naturally just said check status instead of check is good? That's kind of an inclination to me mentally that I'm going to trip over that in future. So I'm going to change all this to check status, 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 instead of having good and status and then get mixed up in my terminology there. Let me go back here. Check status, check status, address of status, and I expect true. I expect status to be true. See what I'm doing here? So we're good up to this point, all right? But then if we add this duplicate entry, remember we already added that and that. So now I'm going to say, well, let's check status again right here. So do something stupid, check the status right here, and then I expect the status to not be good. All right, you see my logic there, I hope. So let's Control-Shift-B, see what the compiler says. Oh, I succeeded, so it's just IntelliSense having personal issues. Okay, I'm going to run these tests, and we should get some red. Sure enough, I saw some red fly by. Error value of not status. Very good. Expected true, but it was false. So, you know, I actually should initialize the. No, I shouldn't because I expect that to initialize. I was going to initialize it here. I'm just glad the tests failed. So let's get this status thing. Let's go in here. First of all, I want to say star status gets the good bit. Did I call it good? I thought I did call it good. But again, I want to get rid of that good terminology. So let me right here status. Right there, and then I'm going to say this status. So I know that seems kind of weird, but basically dereference what they're giving me and assign it to what I know. Control-Shift-B. Good, undeclared identifier. Yep, status. It's so frustrating that IntelliSense doesn't keep up with the compiler. Compile, build succeeded. C# is much better at that. Microsoft, obviously C# is a much more mainstream business programming kind of thing, and their flagship product. So, yeah, I mean, their Visual Studio is very good for C++, but it's extremely frustrating bouncing between C# and C++ and getting so much help in C#, and yet no help, or little help in C++. I'll be grateful for what I have. The build run. Let's run this. Make sure our tests still fail. They do fail. And I'm going up here. Not status is still okay. Failing. Let's do some stuff here. So when you add a duplicate entry, we want to make sure that you don't screw up here. So right here I'm going to say check for duplicate entry, like so, and then maybe one thing at a time. So again, this is going to be a little for loop to make sure that they haven't added the entry again. We're getting a duplicate category. Let's call it category. Check for duplicate category, and we need to pass the category in here. And so in here we'll check if they've added a duplicate category. That's going to take time, runtime. But again, this is the profiler. And if they're profiling, they've already measured what they're trying to do. They're just having us save it. And if it takes us a little bit longer to save it, that's fine because they're done measuring whatever it is that they're measuring. Does that make sense? We call add entry. If I go back to that profile class, we say initialize start, and then between the constructor running and the destructor running, the consumer of this class is doing their profiling, their long time. Let's measure what's going on here between calling these two functions. Let me show you in my GL window. Remember we said profile, right? This creates the constructor. We do our expensive code, quote unquote, and then we call the destructor. So we're done doing the measuring, right? All we want to do is say, hey, whatever that last lap time is, add it. So when we get to the add entry function, the add entry says, well, it's going to take me a little longer, but I'm going to do some checks for you. Just make sure you're using this profiler correctly. So I'm okay with this taking a little bit longer. And again, it's debug code. We'll vaporize it when we actually want to speed up our frame rates. So let's actually make this function. Want it to be private. It needs to compile out with everything on, or with everything else. So check for duplicate category. And then in here, well, no, I return a void. I was going to return a bool. You may think, hey, Jamie, these are returning booleans. How are you going to compile those out when they return booleans? Well, remember they're private functions. These are private functions. So the outside consumers who are going to vaporize the code can't grab these, right? Internally inside the, for now, the engine project, we'll put it into a different debug project. But for now, we can vaporize it. No big deal, because it's private and it's only used within this class. And I should do a video showing you how the compiler vaporizes code. Anyway, check for duplicate category, const char star category, like so. And this is the const function. Good. Go over here, enter, control end, right here. Check for duplicate category, profiler, curly. Alright, should be pretty straightforward. For uint, oh, I'm so glad I have that. I'm going to hit F12 on that, just, well, whatever. For uint, I get 0, I less than, go over here, I can't remember what I called it. Is it num categories, recurrent category? Category index, okay. So let's go through all the categories that we currently have. And status and equals stir compare categories sub I dot name with category equal 0. No, that's not what I want to do. Let me tell you my logic I was thinking there. I was thinking, hey, I'm trying to be a fancy programmer, to be honest. I'm just trying to show off, but I don't think my showing off is going to work. I'm saying compare category's name with category, and that should actually not be equal to 0. Alright, they're giving me, let me just illustrate here. Let's say they give us, for categories, peanuts, popcorn, jelly. Actually, peanuts, popcorn, peanuts. Alright, and then status we know is true. So on the first profile entry they give us peanuts. Then they give us popcorn. But then on the third one we say peanuts. So this is the guy we're trying. Alright, we're going to say, hey, do we already have peanuts? And so we come in here and we say, alright, well, status is true. Compare category sub I name to category. That should not be 0. Alright, well, is peanuts equal to peanuts? Yeah. So stir compare will return 0. 0 not equal to 0? Well, that's false. Alright, so all this will vaporize and become a false. And then I say, hey, status, let's AND that with the results there. Well, true ANDed with false will give me a false, and then status will just flip to false, and that's our current status. Something went wrong somewhere. You did something bad. Alright? But let me go back to here. Say they, instead of giving us peanuts, popcorn, peanuts, they gave us jelly beans. Come on, Jamie. Jelly beans, like so. Well, alright. Let's go through this again. They're trying to give us jelly beans. I'll put my arrow back in there. We have peanuts. So is peanuts equal to jelly beans? No. Alright. That'll return. This function will not return 0. Say it returns a -1. Alright. -1 not equal to 0? Well, yeah, that is true. So then true, ANDed with true. Well, it's still going to be true. Ah, good, good. Alright, let me bring that back. Alright, let's check it. Popcorn. Alright, is popcorn equal to jelly beans? Well, no, that's going to be a... That's not equal, so I'll return -1. Alright, well, -1 not equal to 0, that's true. So then true will AND that with true. Alright, so anyway, hopefully you're seeing what's going on here. Now, say things are good. You know, say things are good like this, but then somewhere else, somewhere in our code, maybe we'll get more intricate with our debugging here and writing some status checks with our profiler. Say we come in here and status is false. Well, you can be as true as you want over here. True. But if status is false, then status is going to remain false. All right, that's my logic is once status goes false, it's always false. And the easiest way to check it against conditions we expect to exist like this is just say, well, AND it. And if we ever see a false, then we'll flip to false. Otherwise, we're good. True and true is true. Hope that made sense. Let me get rid of this. Control-Shift-B, build. Build started. Status cannot be modified through a const object. Duh. Oh. Oh, we're modifying status. It's like, hey, but you said you're not going to modify any data members, Jamie. What's going on? Doesn't make yeah. Oops, sorry, didn't think that one through. Let me get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. Control-Shift-B. Build succeeded. Okay, here's hoping the unit test passed now. We'll see. Control F5. Well, look at that. All green. Okay, I think that was pretty useful. We found a condition in our profiler that we didn't expect, or I didn't expect it. I had a hunch to verify that was the problem. Either way, we wrote unit tests to verify that our profiler was actually not checking for duplicate categories. So then we went and made those tests pass. So now that our profiler is set up like this, I'm willing to bet that when I run the game, when we're getting all those debug windows, we're calling paint, and adding duplicate categories, that now the profiler will catch it and its status will switch to false. But the one thing we failed to do was to assert our status. So let's do that. We need to... Where would be the best place to assert this? I think what we should do, first of all, let me collapse all these. I'm sorry this video is dragging on, but I don't think, well, I think for these debugging ones, it's okay for me to drag it on, because if you want to skip it, then all you have to do is skip one long video instead of following me along for like a series of 5-10 videos. So where would be the best place to check our status? I think the best place to check our status would be in new frame. We know this is being called every single frame. So let's assert our status here. And that will blow up in our face. We've seen it blow up in our face. We need to replace this assert with something custom that we write so we can get better error messages. But for now, I need something. I'll use the built-in assert. And let's switch over to the game, sandbox game, right click, set as startup project, control F5. Yes, we got that abort very quickly. Let me put a breakpoint here, F5. Get rid of this breakpoint. Ooh, get rid of that one, F5. Status is true. We know on the first frame we're good. So status is good, but then the next frame it goes to false because we added a duplicate entry. All right, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Let me illustrate that a little bit. Shift F5. Where's the add entry at? Right here. Just for debugging, let me show you. Right here, I'm going to say, actually, let's go in here. I'm going to get rid of all of our breakpoints. Control Shift F9. Yes. Click here, F12 to go to that function. Open it up. And right here, I want to say, just to prove to you that status switches off, I'm going to put some debug code here. If not status int, I can put a breakpoint on this line now. Gets whatever. Okay. Put a breakpoint there. I know once the status goes to false, immediately my debugger will break right here. Okay, F5. Build started, build succeeded. Sure enough, status went to false. I am going to bet that our categories, yeah. Oh, we're still in hexadecimal display. Category matrix multiplication. I right now is at 0. That's right, because we added matrix multiplication several times. So that's kind of cool. We're now catching the error much faster. Shift F5, stop the debugger. Let me get rid of this debug code now. Let me just control F5. Remember when this initially popped up, we got several of these windows just pop, 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 in your face, in your face, in your face. But now that we're taking control of the situation, you get one, right? There's a problem here. We detected the error, not some random, oh, you didn't check for that. So I'm feeling like I'm gaining control here. We need to fix the problem, though. And we're going to do that in the next video.